And welcome back. And for the next round of questioning, we're actually going to throw it to our panel. First up, we have the Director of Reader Engagement for the Republican, Rob Genest.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for coming in, gentlemen. This question is related to casinos. 2011 law passed by the legislature approved the licensing of up to 3 resort-style casinos and a slots parlor in Massachusetts, but a ballot initiative pending could repeal the entire law. In Springfield, voters approved an MGM casino last July, and some are now concerned the rest of the state gets to decide the fate of the project. Where do you stand on casinos and the Repeal Initiative?
Very controversial topic here in the Commonwealth, a hot-button issue this election season for sure.
I guess I'll go first. I do not support the casino law as drafted by the legislature. I'm not against casinos. I mean, indeed, my father and I and my brother-in-law have an annual tradition at New Year's going down to Foxwoods and doing a little blackjack. It's the only time my wife lets me do that, by the way. So I'm not fundamentally against casinos, but the law as drafted was not good for Massachusetts. The main reason is because there are 3 casinos throughout the Commonwealth, along with other slots parlors. And the state of Massachusetts cannot maintain a vibrant casino industry when you have 3 casinos, one in Boston, one in another section, one in Western Mass. What I would have liked to have seen was they put one in Western Massachusetts. I support the casino in Springfield. I grew up in Long Meadow. I went to Cathedral High School. I've seen Springfield change over the decades, and I think the casino in downtown Springfield, which was approved by the voters of Springfield, was a good thing. But on a statewide level, I opposed it. I think 3 casinos was bound to cause all casinos to fail. And I think that was the fundamental problem with it. They should have done one tester in the western area of the state, which I think, quite frankly, needs the economic boost more than anyone else. Now, there's a question of whether or not casinos bring economic boost or economic vitality. It's a fair question and a good discussion to have. And it really should be left to the people. I think if they wanted to put casinos in Massachusetts, it should have been through a ballot initiative. And I support this ballot initiative. I think it's a good thing for the state. Because if the people want casinos, they finally have their say. But the law as drafted meant that the casinos would fail. I would like to see one casino in Western Massachusetts, and I think in downtown Springfield, the casino particularly can add economic revitalization. Springfield supports it, the business community supports it, and I think it will have a good effect for all of Western Mass.
So you're not generally opposed to
casino
gaming, but you think that the law as it's drafted allows for too much saturation in the marketplace?
Absolutely. You cannot expect to have Foxwoods, Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, then put one in Boston, one in Central and Western Mass, and expect these casinos to thrive. It's not going to work. I think one casino in Western Mass, which has a very rural tourist industry unto itself, really adds to it. And Springfield wanted it. Right. Springfield really has worked with the business community, unlike anywhere else, quite frankly. And I think it's good for Springfield. And
what about in regards to the repeal effort? So do you support the repeal effort based on the law as it stands?
I support the repeal effort as the law stands now.
Okay.
The big negative is that Springfield, all of a sudden, after all that work, Springfield has no casino. I would like the legislature to do its job and do it right the second time around. If the people passed a ballot initiative, I would like the legislature to consider writing the law again in a very specific, smaller manner and give Springfield its casino. Springfield wants it, and I think it's a good thing.
All right, and Mr. Valanzola.
I'll be voting to repeal the casino law this November. That'll be the vote I take. And I have no moral objection to casino gaming either. I've been to Vegas a few times, and certainly no moral objection. But the simple fact of the matter is the Commonwealth put all their eggs into one basket relative to casino gaming. This legislation was approved under the auspice that if we build it, they will come. And what we've seen time and time again over the last couple of years is significantly declining revenues in the casinos that are in Connecticut. We've seen Twin Rivers now in Rhode Island potentially seek government intervention because they're having major revenue struggles. And this is a dying industry, quite candidly. And we've oversaturated the market. I agree with Jim on that. But we did so because of one reason. And one reason I do support, which is we need jobs in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But I would have preferred a far more all-inclusive approach to bringing jobs to Massachusetts. Imagine if we invested the time, the energy, and the resources in bringing IT companies to Western Massachusetts. Imagine if we talked to small, medium businesses throughout parts of New England and throughout other parts of the country and said, hey, come to Massachusetts. We're going to give you an opportunity to set up your shop here, and we'll create jobs for people in the Commonwealth. I think that there are some positives to be able to bring jobs into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that were quite candidly ignored because the primary focus was, let's just drive casinos. And even more than the jobs issue, one of the things that concerns me the greatest is, as a former selectman, I had to put together town budgets every single year. I know how dependent we are on local aid to communities, especially the 28 communities in the district that I'm hoping to represent. These communities depend on that unrestricted local aid. That unrestricted local aid is funded from the Lottery Commission revenues. If you build 3 casinos in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you will deplete the Lottery Commission revenues without question, and then you will have 28 communities that I'm looking to represent trying to make up the gap and make up the difference. We've already seen a 40% cut to local aid in the Commonwealth. We cannot afford further cuts to local aid, and casino gaming will do just that.
So I guess, what do you say to the voters of Springfield that approved this casino? Like I said, there's some concern now that they've been through this process, they approved it. Now the rest of the state gets to vote on what happens with something they locally decided.
Local decisions are important, but in this case, a local decision will have an impact over the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. By having these casinos in place, you will see depleted local aid numbers, which will directly impact every single municipality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, I agree with the folks of Springfield that we should have let the people of the Commonwealth vote on this 5 years ago, and I was supportive of the effort to do that then. And I think that the legislature missed the boat in allowing the people to have their say 5 years ago. And it's unfortunate that we have had some investments and that we have had some communities that have shown their support of casinos. But we've had a significant number of municipalities reject the concept of casinos. And they've rejected it because they see that the results just aren't there. Revenues are declining, jobs aren't going to come, and local aid will be cut. And I, just as senator, can't support those initiatives.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to kick it back to our panel. We have New England Public Radio senior reporter Kari Injuri with the next question.
Gentlemen, my question is regarding the alarming rise in heroin use. Indeed, the opioid epidemic has peaked in the past year throughout the Northeast U.S., including right here in Massachusetts. The state has allocated additional resources towards treatment, while our federal legislators working to not only increase funding for treatment options, but to increase the availability of Narcan, which is the sort of life-saving drug that revives a heroin overdose victim. My question to you first, Mr. Valanzola, what do you think we need to do as a Commonwealth to help combat this growing problem?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because a number of years ago, we thought substance abuse issues and specifically opiate addiction was really concentrated only in our urban settings. But what we have found over the last few years is this is an issue that we're seeing in rural and suburban parts of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it's an issue that is very prevalent even throughout the 28-town district that I'm looking to represent. I've had conversations with the sheriff and with the police chiefs and with other public safety personnel about how serious an issue this is. Right now, 85% of those incarcerated in our corrections facilities are there because of substance abuse. And this is a real serious problem that we need to tackle. Relative to your question on Narcan, we need to provide the funding, and we need to make sure that all public safety personnel are trained and permitted to be able to administer Narcan. We can do that, and we can do that tomorrow, and we should do it immediately. There's an ability for us to do it. But we also need to step back further and say, how can we ensure that we cultivate a culture of respect, and we cultivate a culture that teaches our kids that there are negative consequences to their actions, and there are negative consequences to the decisions they make as kids. One of the great programs that I've seen implemented in Worcester County, and I've had multiple conversations with Sheriff Evangelitis about this, is this program called Face to Face. And this is a program that we have actually seen deployed throughout Worcester County that allows for the Sheriff's Department to go into middle schools and junior high schools when our kids are truly impressionable, and to be able to show them through this computerized program what they would look like in 10 years, 15 years, if they continue to be addicted to certain drugs and they continue to participate in substance abuse. And we've seen startling responses from the kids. Really, I think some frightening concerns from these kids about what that would do to them. And I think we need to administer that as a program across the entire Commonwealth. Worcester County shouldn't just have it. Let's get it in Hampden County. Let's get it in Hampshire County. Let's implement implement that across the Commonwealth. So to bring it back, we need to focus on education at a very young age. We need to make sure that we're creating awareness in our schools. We need to tackle this problem and make sure that we understand the seriousness of it. And from there, I think if we can continue to work with our public safety personnel to be able to tackle this, we can, but we can't ignore it. And I just read a report the other day that indicated that within the next 10 years, every single person in the Commonwealth will have known somebody that suffers from substance abuse. We cannot continue down this path. We have to tackle it, and we have to tackle it today.
Sure.
It's a good question. Indeed, throughout the district, in different other media sources, they're asking the same question. Just in the last few days in Worcester, the city itself, 6 people died from drug overdoses, probably bad drugs, and the city of Worcester is trying to chase down where those drugs are coming from. Look, the government can't solve everyone's problems, and people make choices in life, and they have to deal with the consequences of that. But these consequences are affecting communities, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, uncles. So the government has a role to play in trying to stem this tide. Understanding it can only do so much. I think Mike and I agree about the issue of Narcan, of course. We have to provide basic funding so our first responders and emergency crews have the ability to provide that when necessary. That's a good use of it. No one minds spending government money for local aid, school aid, police, fire. Spending taxpayer dollars on Narcan makes perfect sense. If it can save some father, mother, sister from a funeral, then of course you support that. I agree with Michael as for getting to the schools at an impressionable age. I mean, Sheriff Evangelitis' program has been very successful, and quite frankly, is a model in the state. And it's not forcing some value system upon these kids. It's just telling them the honest truth about drug use. That if you get into drugs, you're going to ruin your life. And at that early age, it shows them in their face, through photographs and so on, what the consequences are. There's merit in that. Because remember, a lot of these kids, even in our district, go to broken homes. Mothers and fathers who aren't paying attention to them.
Certainly.
Mothers and fathers who are on drugs themselves. I mean, teachers and governments can't be parents. We have to understand we live in a very difficult time right now where we have many broken homes. Indeed, we see illegitimacy rates among non-college educated white families of 41%. I mean, it's very hard to build a social structure around those types of rates. So when the government provides funds for Sheriff Evangelitis' program and so on, it does help play a role in leading those kids down the right path. So as a state senator, I would support funding for Narcan, of course. I would support funding for, school programs that work. And Sheriff Evangelitis' program seems to work. But I would also understand that we can only do so much. One thing I've talked about, a lot of people haven't talked about, is enforcement. When you can stem the drugs coming into the district, then you can stem the usage of it. We need to bulk up the DA's ability and the state police and local police ability to interdict those drugs before they get in the district. We have laws in the books, we must enforce them, and I would actually support more funding for our DA's offices, for our state police, and for our local police for drug interdiction. Get the dealers, grab the dealers, and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Right now, our assistant DAs make less than many legal secretaries do. I would support increasing funding for assistant DAs so that we can get good lawyers who stay there for a long period of time and learn the job, and they can take on the hard cases. Taking out a drug deal is a hard prosecutorial case, and I want to provide the funds so they can do that. There's a way to solve this problem. It can't be rectified entirely, but we can help stem the tide. Hard prosecution, tough sentencing, and school classes.
Okay, so you both talk about a multifaceted approach.
It has to be. It has to be.
Briefly, just on the topic of education, a big criticism of the drug education. It's kind of a patchwork. There's no, national program per se across the country. But major criticism is that historically, the education system has told kids that all drugs are bad. They're all equally bad. And because of that, kids aren't stupid. They completely lose credibility. And that's where you kind of lead children into trying things, harder drugs, that perhaps they wouldn't if people were more honest with their education up front. And this kind of brings us back to the whole debate over an abstinence-based education versus safe sex thing, without getting into that whole debate. But just talking on the drug issue, we talk about education. I'm not familiar with the intricacies of Sheriff Evangelitis' program, but I guess, if there is such an education program you're supporting on the state level, would it be for, I guess, evidence-based education that different drugs do have different effects, and some things are worse than others.
Absolutely. Facts are facts. I mean, let's get down to brass tacks. And I think that there were programs in the Commonwealth that did just what you're suggesting. Unfortunately, the DARE program, the RAD program, those programs have been eliminated in many communities throughout the Commonwealth because the legislature has cut community policing grants every single year for the past 8 years. Those community policing grants, and I know this firsthand, I was a selectman when the cuts came in. Those grants were what allowed us to ensure that we have a police presence in our schools, that we have a police presence in our communities so that kids feel comfortable with our law enforcement, so that kids feel comfortable to be able to speak to the law enforcement about their concerns and their issues. And because of those cuts, we've lost the ability to maintain some of those relationships, which I think go back to the exact question you're asking, which is how can we discuss the facts, how can we be credible, and how can we prove forward with a legitimate response to some of these issues. We don't have the ability to do it because of so many cuts from the legislature in that regard.
We have to look further back. All this begins in the home. I mean,
Certainly.
when you have a strong family, strong parental involvement, that's how you really stem the scourge of drugs. When you say, you shouldn't be hanging out with these people, they're bad for you. I'm watching you, son. I'm watching you, daughter. You'll be home by 10 o'clock. I'm going to go find you and bring you home. That's how you really stem the tide of these drugs. But once again, the government can't change family structure. As for how you educate children about drugs, I'm not sure which program is the best. That's really for local communities to decide. If Tantasco High School thinks the DARE program works, then all means let them do that. If the Athol School District likes, Evangelize's program, let them do that. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all type of situation. Each town has its own problems. Some towns have a far worse drug problem than some of the other towns do, and they need to be able to adjust their budgets as necessary.
So provide the funding and let the local towns and school
I'm not
districts
sure which
decide
program
how
works.
they want to educate them.
I don't think saying cocaine is worse than heroin or worse than marijuana is necessarily the right way to teach them. I think drugs are bad, and once you begin that pathway, it's often very hard to turn around. You see, but once again, each school committee and superintendent should make that choice. I mean, each town has its own culture. You've seen this driving these 28 towns. Each town is different, its own people, its own culture, its own economic situation.
Right.
And what they want, they should be able to decide. We can all agree spending taxpayer dollars on police, fire, drug education is a good thing. And once again, local aid has been cut 40% in the last few years, while the budget has gone up 38%. So there's a disconnect in the legislature from the needs of the district to what they want. I mean, half our budget goes to mass healthcare entitlement transfers, yet we can't find money to provide drug education in the schools. That's why as a state senator, I want to bring that voice to Beacon Hill, saying, wait a second, guys in Boston, there are things going out here in these 28 towns you don't understand. We shouldn't be spending half of our budget on failing systems. Give Sturbridge an extra, $6,000 for its drug education program. Give Brimfield, give Petersham. And right now we need to have a state senator who will do that, and I hope to be that state senator.
One of the points I just want to make before we move off of this topic,
Yes.
because I do agree with Jim in the context of 28 very different towns with 28, a litany of 28 very different issues. Of
course.
But the simple fact of the matter is a state senator's role is to be the leader in that region. A state senator's role is to be able to go into these communities and find where the common issues are. And I'll tell you, travel in these 28 towns, there are a lot of issues that each of the towns face jointly. And if we work together to solve those issues jointly, we can find common problems and we can also find common solutions, and I think we can do it for a much more affordable way. So although I agree with Jim that that the 28 towns represent very different issues, there are many common issues, and it's a state senator's job to be able to mediate those issues and help the towns work jointly to solve their problems.
So take local input, take a regional approach.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right, we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be back momentarily.